Hey folks, David Stewart here. What I'd like to talk about tonight is what I call the Roald Dahl technique. I can also call it the myth of the resilient child. This is one of many literary techniques that are used to evoke sympathy or empathy from the reader or from the viewer in the case of a movie towards a character, usually the protagonist. You can also just as easily, by the way, call this the J.K. Rowling technique or the Harry Potter technique, because Rowling uses this at the first 5 or 6 Harry Potter books at the beginning and keeps returning to it for each subsequent book. Basically, the device works like this. You show a protagonist, you show the character at the beginning of the story suffering a great injustice, and in this case it's child abuse. So if you look at all of Roald Dahl's books, they all begin with essentially a variation on the same theme, which is the child is abused or victimized somehow. His parents are dead, he has to live with someone that doesn't like him, or his parents are dead, and that creates a hardship for him. He has to move out of the country or something like that. In James and the Giant Peach, his parents die and he has to go live with his wicked aunts, which make him do all the chores and treat him terribly. And then he gets his revenge when his giant peach rolls over them and kills them. I know, great children's literature. And Harry Potter, which you might be more familiar with simply because it sold a whole lot more books and it's more in the public mind right now. You see Harry Potter at the beginning, it has his parents murdered and gets placed with his aunt and uncle. And next you see him, he's living underneath the stairs. He's like the person under the stairs, hanging out with spiders, forced to make breakfast for his family and all these sorts of things. And it's a really terrible life for him. Now, J.K. Rowling actually uses this device for 2 different things. But the main reason that you use this device is to evoke sympathy or empathy, because people have children, people are naturally inclined to care about the needs and wants of children. When you see a child crying, it's usually upsetting. So when you show a child being abused, it's a really easy way to evoke somebody's sympathy or empathy. There's lots of literary devices that do this. If you've ever read the screenwriting manual Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which I don't necessarily recommend, the title comes from one of these devices. At the beginning of a movie, you show a character saving a cat, saving somebody's animal. That gets the audience on their side, so as they continue to make mistakes throughout the movie or even do misdeeds, the audience continues to root for them. It identifies to the audience who the good guy is. Now, I'm talking about this one partly because, number one, I think showing child abuse is kind of a dirty trick. Right? It's too easy a path towards evoking somebody's sympathy or empathy. The other reason that I want to talk about it is that I don't think you should use it, not because it's offensive or because it's cheap and dirty, but because it's really not realistic. And if you talk to anyone, or if you're watching this and you happen to be a person who's ever worked with troubled kids who have suffered massive abuse and neglect, most of them are not very resilient. They don't come out of that normal. And what you see in Roald Dahl is the kid is abused or neglected and comes out of it normal or better than normal. So in Matilda, her parents are stupid. They ignore her. They don't like her. They try to force her to watch television when she doesn't want to. She teaches herself to read and is, of course, smarter and morally superior to them as well. And that's a way that we begin the book with that, so that you get kind of on Matilda's side immediately. But it's not very believable. The reality is, if someone like Harry Potter had his parents get murdered in front of him as a baby, then was put into the care of an aunt and uncle who didn't care for him, neglected him, probably didn't hold him, don't talk to him, treat him like a servant, and generally belittle him and show hatred and contempt towards him all the time, he probably would not be in the state he is when we see the movies. Or we watch the books. In other words, he functions as an everyman in the books and the movies, meaning he's pretty vanilla. He's pretty bland. He's a normal kid with normal wants and normal problems and normal flaws. He's just exceedingly normal. And that's not what abused kids end up like. Abused kids end up with their traumatic experiences create often personality disorders. And if the abuse or neglect happens when they're very young, they can end up as like sociopaths. Because you miss out on this part of your emotional and your neurological development where you form attachments with other people. So you're unable to feel sympathy or empathy toward people. In reality, Harry Potter would have been an extremely troubled teen because of the home that he came from. So instead of going off to Hogwarts and being excited and acting like a normal kid, he'd have gone to Hogwarts and been unable to make friends and been in fights and threatened people and tried to kill people and probably been expelled because of his relentlessly antisocial behavior. This is the way that really abused kids often turn out. Not always. Some kids, like, no matter what you do to them, they just kind of come out of it okay. But if you've ever had to work with kids who have a history of neglect or abuse, they have an uphill climb towards having a normal relationship with their peers or being able to function in an academic environment. So rather than having a realistic presentation of that, you just kind of forget that the teen would have any effects of the horrible neglect and abuse that they have, and just show them being a normal kid. And that's not very realistic. So it's a dirty trick, and it's not super realistic. And so for that reason, I think it's something that you probably will want to avoid using. That doesn't mean you can't use other devices to gain sympathy for the kid. A kid could have something bad happen to him. That's sympathy. That's not necessarily, you don't have to like go all out and have his parents die and have him be abused or have him be horribly poor, like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. All of these things, all of these extreme conditions imposed upon children have an effect on them. I believe they do, and in my experience, they certainly do. And that effect does not produce kids of exceptional moral quality. Now, going back to Harry Potter, the device actually serves 2 points in Harry Potter. So the first point it serves is to get you on Harry Potter's side and make you feel a bunch of sympathy for him, so that that can become an empathetic feeling as the story goes on. The other thing is to heighten the escapism that Harry Potter provides. And escapism is something that's present in a lot of Roald Dahl's novels as well, but it's really strong in Harry Potter. And escapism is you escape from the mundane, the normal life, into something fantastical. You escape from a life where you're meaningless and abused, and you go into a life where you are important and loved. And that's a really, really strong thing that happens, especially in that first Harry Potter book. Harry is unloved, he's ignored, he's abused. Hagrid comes and takes him away and says, "You're actually wizard, and you get to go to this amazing school, and you get to be unique and special and honorable, and to kick it all, put a nice cherry on top, you're really famous because you survived this attack as a baby, and people, adults are already really liking you." Now, that actually also creates tension for Harry Potter too, because other kids don't like him for being famous for no reason, like not for anything that he did, right? So it works on two levels in Harry Potter. It provides an immediate sympathy response, and it heightens that escape. He's escaping from something bad into a world where he matters and he's good and all these sorts of things. Some people have said, well, Harry Potter is actually the delusional story that this abused child came up with, and I think that's a fun thing to think about. That's recognizing that essentially Harry Potter would come out of a really abusive home like that with some significant issues to overcome, and those aren't really addressed. They're kind of ignored. So that's the device. I call it the Roald Dahl technique. You'll see it in a bunch of his books: Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The list will go on and on and on. The Witches usually begins with a child with his parents dying, that sort of stuff. And at the same level, I think that's present also in kids' movies. Another theme that exists in Roald Dahl is that the kid is always powerless, because children often feel powerless. So when Roald Dahl writes books for children, he writes them to their feelings rather than the reality, and they often feel like they're downtrodden, abused, powerless, even if they're not, and their parents are just punishing them for bad things they did, or their parents happen to be strict. So you kind of play towards the feelings and work with that rather than showing anything that's kind of realistic towards the kids. So thanks so much for watching that. I hope you guys will have a great day. Let me know what you want to see and what you want to hear down below, and you can find me outside gab.ai, David V. Stewart, twitter.com, David V. Stewart, davidvstewart.com, obviously, stu@davidvstewart.com if you want to email me, or you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/David Van Dyke Stewart. And I do my best to try to get back to you on those channels. And I hope you guys will have a great day. See you next time.